Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and meticulously unpack them, searching for those crucial nuggets of knowledge.
That's the plan.
Today, we have an exceptionally potent and, well, in some ways, incredibly challenging stack of materials before us. It's a deep dive into the very fabric of our global systems, exploring both these stark predictions for their future and some truly thought-provoking alternative ideas about how those systems might be managed and perceived.
That's right. The sources you've provided today offer a striking duality, really. On one hand, we have a robust geopolitical and economic forecast, meticulously mapping out a future characterized by, well, deglobalization and profound demographic shifts.
Okay.
On the other, we're presented with a significantly different, far more controversial interpretation of global events, one that alleges deliberate orchestration behind the scenes. Our mission, as always, is to explore both perspectives with absolute impartiality, presenting the arguments and specific details found within your sources, connecting the dots, and hopefully giving you a comprehensive understanding of these diverse viewpoints.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a journey.
It promises to spark some serious aha moments, I think, and undoubtedly a few new questions for you to ponder.
Let's truly dive into this, shall we?
Yeah.
Our first major theme immediately sets the stage for a world undergoing massive systemic transformation. Okay, so one of our primary sources puts forth a powerful, almost unsettling core thesis. It argues that the American-led order is giving way to disorder, signifying nothing less than the end of an era that this source describes quite starkly as the best it will ever be.
Wow, okay. That's blunt.
It is. And this isn't just about a minor economic downturn. It's about a fundamental reordering of global dynamics. The prediction for the 2020s is a profound collapse of consumption and production and investment and trade almost everywhere.
Almost everywhere. That's huge.
Exactly. The implication is clear. Globalization as we know it will shatter, fragmenting into regional, national, and even smaller pieces. This shift, the source warns, will be costly and make life slower. And above all, worse.
Right. Slower and worse. Not exactly optimistic.
Not at all. What's particularly striking, though, and vital for our understanding, is that the primary focus isn't simply on how this world ends, but to map out what everything looks like on the other side of this changing condition.
Ah, okay. So it's trying to look past the collapse.
Precisely. Exploring new parameters of the possible and outlining new geographies of success in this emerging deglobalized world.
Right.
For you, our listener, this immediately challenges any assumption of a return to the normal we once knew. And, well, it compels us to consider the powerful underlying forces already reshaping our collective future.
Precisely. This source isn't merely offering a gloomy prediction. It's attempting to provide a comprehensive framework for navigating what comes next. You know, when the existing global economic system, which has defined our lives for decades, reaches its functional limits.
And a key driver of that limit.
Well, one of the most relentless, undeniable forces driving this unraveling, according to the source, is demographics. It vividly describes this as a pipe bomb.
A pipe bomb.
Yeah, a metaphor for global aging, with the global worker and consumer base aging into mass retirement. A critical inflection point, it states, was reached in 2022-2023 when the majority of the world's baby boomers turned 65 and began retiring en masse.
Okay, that timing is significant.
Very. It creates a double hit. A significant numerical loss of experienced labor and, crucially, a loss of vital skilled expertise.
Right, not just numbers, but skills too.
Exactly. The consequence. Persistent labor shortages and inflationary pressures that are, frankly, difficult to resolve. And this isn't a sudden phenomenon either. It's a trend with decades of steam behind it. Yeah, stemming from a collapse in birth rates that began in developed nations back in the 1960s and then spread to developing nations in the 1990s. It's been building for a long time.
To make this concept more tangible, our sources give us some incredibly compelling case studies, starting with China. The data reveals China as the fastest aging society in human history.
Yeah, that's a startling statistic.
It really is. Its population growth story, we learn, effectively concluded when birth rates slipped below replacement levels, that crucial 2.1 children per woman needed to maintain population back in the 1990s.
Back in the 90s? Wow.
And as of early 2022, China's birth rate is, at most, 1.3, leading to a projected complete demographic collapse within a single generation.
A single generation.
Think about that for a moment. The country is described as having moved from pre-industrial to post-industrial demographic collapse in a single human lifetime. The speed of this shift is truly unprecedented.
It's hard to even grasp that speed. And then consider the contrasting yet equally stark example of Japan.
Right. Different path, same problem.
Well, this nation is presented as having been on the path to demographic oblivion for more than 5 decades due to extreme urbanization and persistently low birth rates. The source notes that Japan passed its demographic point of no return back in the 1990s.
So even earlier than China hit that sub-replacement level.
Right. Yet, rather than simply collapsing, the Japanese government and corporate world have demonstrated a unique resilience. They have branched out in ways that reflect the country's underlying demographic weaknesses and strengths, adapting ingeniously to this long-term challenge.
So they managed it differently.
They've had longer to adapt, perhaps. What's truly fascinating here, for anyone trying to understand global futures, is how demographics are not just a social statistic, but a fundamental, foundational driver of geopolitical and economic shifts. It directly influences everything from consumption patterns to production capabilities and investment strategies. It's baked into the system now.
And this brings us to an event we all remember vividly, the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's where it gets truly insightful, I think. The source argues that the pandemic wasn't just a health crisis in isolation. It acted as a massive stress test.
Yes, stress test. Yeah, that makes sense.
For an already unsustainable global system. It describes the pandemic, starting in November 2019 in China, as having cavitated the economic normal.
Cavitated? What does that mean here?
It essentially hollowed out, exposed, and dramatically accelerated the underlying weaknesses and vulnerabilities, within a system we had come to assume was stable and robust.
Okay, so it didn't cause the cracks, but it made them much wider, much faster.
Exactly. Initial information suppression in China, the source suggests, transformed what could have been a local concern into a global pandemic. This triggered immense economic disruptions. Widespread lockdowns, dramatic shifts in consumption patterns, fewer services, more specific goods like home electronics.
I remember that whiplash.
Right. And with every lockdown or reopening, manufacturers worldwide scrambled, attempting to retool their efforts, leading to wildly inflationary pressures. This global shock, remember, occurred precisely as baby boomers were moving into retirement and onto fixed incomes, placing immense pressure on an already strained system.
Ah, that connection again, the timing.
So the pandemic, while devastating in its own right, ultimately served as an accelerant, exposing those cracks rather than being the root cause of the coming systemic shifts, according to this analysis.
To truly understand the potential future, our source takes us way back to humanity's very first technological suite, sedentary agriculture.
Okay, the farming revolution.
Right. This pivotal moment, colorfully termed the Great Poo Breakthrough,
Okay.
for its revolutionary impact on human settlement and, yes, waste management, introduced humanity to a fundamental geopolitical principle. Location matters, and which locations matter more changes with the technology of the day.
Location, 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 but based on tech.
Exactly. In the earlier hunter-gatherer era, success wasn't about fixed land, it was about range and variety, efficiently tapping multiple types of plants and animals for nutrition. People naturally concentrated in areas that offered a great deal of climatic variety within a dense footprint, like mountain foothills, or where the tropics blended into the savanna. This allowed easy relocation to, greener pastures as seasons changed.
Right. Mobility was key then. That initial insight really lays the groundwork. Fast forward, and before the age of deepwater navigation, our sources explain that extensive trade was exceedingly rare.
Yeah, just too hard.
Due to what they call tyrannies of distance. Roads, if they existed at all, generally stayed within a single culture, and the cost and effort of transport meant there simply wasn't enough variety of goods to justify extensive trade. Navigable rivers were the rare exceptions.
Right. River cultures tended to be richer.
Makes sense. But the advent of deepwater navigation changed everything. Suddenly, trade routes could be measured in thousands of miles.
The total game changer.
Absolutely. This technological leap caused the value and volume of trade to explode, while simultaneously plummeting the cost of transport. This, in turn, fueled massive urbanization and labor specialization, enabling the shipment of far less exotic goods, things like lumber, textiles, sugar, tea, or wheat, from distant continents directly to what the source terms imperial centers.
So bulk goods, not just luxuries. That fundamentally reshaped global supply and demand.
It did.
This new era of global connection, however, proved incredibly disruptive. The Industrial Revolution, according to the source, tore the delicate balance apart at every level. It unleashed an avalanche of social upheaval, Revolutions, riots, political collapses, and wars across Europe as nations scrambled to apply these transformative new technologies.
Yeah, a chaotic period.
Hugely chaotic. The British transformation, which involved mass development, urbanization, mortality reduction, population expansion, and eventually birth rate reductions, was a lengthy process taking 7 generations.
7 generations. That's a long adaptation time.
It is. But then history speeds up. As industrial technologies like textiles, steam, steel, electricity, and fertilizer diffused outward, their application in new lands was much faster. Their impacts on demographic structures in nations like Germany, Russia, Japan, and China were equally accelerated. The time for societies to adapt shrank dramatically.
Right, the followers industrialized faster, but maybe with more shock.
Potentially, yes. Interestingly, the American experience followed a distinctly different path, which offers a crucial contrast. The U.S. industrial transformation was slower and less jarring compared to Europe's, allowing generations to adapt to change at a more manageable pace.
Why was that?
Well, uniquely among the major global powers, America's population was both expanding and wealthy. This meant its burgeoning industrial output, particularly from the Northeast and the Steel Belt, could be easily absorbed internally.
A huge domestic market.
Exactly. There was no desperate need to export to maintain local economic balances, thus allowing the U.S. to largely avoid the intense economic warfare that had characterized the British Empire.
Yeah.
Plus, the Midwestern settlement, with its efficient internal transport system, reliable food production, and financial depth provided by numerous small local banks, further contributed to American specialization and, perhaps most importantly, a profound cultural unification across a vast continent.
So internal cohesion and market size were key differentiators.
Absolutely. And this distinction is critical to understanding the present. Post-World War II, the U.S. emerged as the most powerful nation on Earth, yet it made a strategic choice not to pursue global domination in a traditional sense.
Right, they set up a new system instead.
Precisely. It offered its wartime allies a transformative deal. The U.S. Navy, the only one of significant size left intact, would patrol the global oceans, effectively protecting the commerce of all nations.
Global security, essentially.
Yes, and the American market, the only market of significant size and wealth to survive, would open its doors to allied exports, enabling these nations to rebuild and grow their economies. This unprecedented American order created the world's first truly global security and economic architecture.
Which enabled everything else we think of as globalization.
Pretty much. It enabled worldwide industrialization and urbanization on an unprecedented scale. The 1990s in particular were characterized by strong American-provided security, a notable absence of serious international conflicts, and the deep penetration of global trade. We saw the rapid rise of the Asian tigers and, eventually, China.
Right, driving down consumer prices, enabling complex supply chains.
Exactly. And as the source aptly notes, we all came to think of it as normal.
But it wasn't normal.
Not really. It was a unique, American-backed anomaly. This raises an important question. In a world where change is happening at breakneck speed, what advantages does a more gradual, internally robust development path offer? And crucially, what happens when that anomaly of global order begins to unwind?
Exactly. So what does this all mean for us now? It means we're looking at the unwinding of an entire era, a normal that wasn't normal at all, but a unique American-backed anomaly that has shaped our modern world, and the impacts will be profound. Let's consider something as commonplace as your local grocery store today. It typically holds around 40,000 individual items sourced from anywhere, anytime.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing when you stop to think about it.
Our source describes this as nothing short of a technological miracle. Reliable availability at an incredibly low cost. But historically, human transport was frail and ridiculously inefficient.
Just legs, mostly, for millennia.
Right. For millennia, human legs were the primary means of movement, until basic inventions like wheelbarrows emerged around 100 CE, or bicycles in the late 18th century. Even early deepwater shipping was severely limited, not just by technology, but by geopolitics. Empires generally didn't buy essential foodstuffs from others.
Right, trade focused on non-perishable luxury goods like spices or porcelain. Stuff that wouldn't rot and was worth the trip.
Exactly. The steam engine, while a revolution, presented its own challenges.
Yeah.
Early ships were made of wood and coal, which burns at over 3,000 degrees, posed significant fire risks.
Yikes. Wooden ships, coal furnaces?
Not ideal. It also required far-flung coaling stations to resupply, which in turn profoundly shaped the British Empire's colonial expansion. It was only post-WWII, under the framework of the American order, that the theoretical limits on how far a city could reach for its resources were essentially removed,
Okay.
allowing cities to grow by drawing everything from anywhere else, everywhere else.
And this technological miracle has led to a system of immense complexity and, paradoxically, fragility. Modern container ships are described in the source as fat beasts, slow-moving vessels, maxing out at just under 29 miles per hour, yet each carrying thousands of containers.
Thousands.
And over half of these containers, it's critical to understand, are packed with intermediate goods essential to the fabrication of pretty much all manufactured products.
So not finished goods, but parts for finished goods.
Exactly. This highlights the extreme specialization of the global workforce, where many individuals and facilities only know how to produce one specific piece of each product. Adding to this vulnerability, modern ports are few, far between, absolutely massive, and typically not co-located with the populations they serve.
Bottlenecks waiting to happen.
Potentially, our cities themselves have become so large and specialized that they now require regular access not just to a huge swath of territory, but to the entire globe. The source issues a stark warning about a cascade effect. If any single ship is unable to transport or disgorge its cargo, the impacts cascade throughout hundreds of thousands of supply chains across multiple industries and in multiple regions.
Wow, just one ship.
Even brief delays, it argues, would force a painful rationalization of entire industries. The vivid example provided is this. It takes 30,000 pieces to make a car. If you only have 29,999 pieces, you've got an ambitiously sized paperweight.
Chuckles. Yeah. Okay, that image of the paperweight car really drives home the point about systemic fragility. And these vulnerabilities aren't abstract. Our source points to specific vulnerable geographies of transport that are critical to global trade. First, consider Asia's first island chain.
Right, Japan down through Taiwan, the Philippines.
Exactly. Stretching from Japan down through China, Korea, and Taiwan. This region is characterized by intense competition, boasts the longest supply lines on Earth, and has a massive export dependency. The source bluntly warns that everything we know about modern manufacturing ends the first time anyone shoots at a single commercial ship in this strategically vital area.
That's sobering.
Very. And second, there's the Persian Gulf, a naturally arid region whose modern existence was entirely transformed by oil. Under the umbrella of globalization, the U.S. patrolled it to power global trade and its alliances. The source explicitly states that without this consistent U.S. presence, America's global strategy would have been dead on arrival.
So, U.S. security was the linchpin there. Then we turn to Europe's predicament. Europe, as it stands, is highly reliant on global trade, suffers from aging demographics, and possesses a significant lack of indigenous resources.
A triple whammy.
Pretty much. The source questions the very survival of its socialist democratic model and predicts a permanent recession with deglobalization. This challenge is further compounded by deep internal divisions.
Like what?
Well, with Germany being the biggest economic player but paradoxically lacking viable options on its own, while France and the UK have historically hedged their bets and never fully integrated with the rest of Europe in the same way.
Okay.
Looking at the broader global picture, the future for global trade is presented as increasingly fractured, and the unraveling will also impact everyone differently.
Oh, so give me some examples.
Okay, take the Western Hemisphere, for example. It's well-positioned for food and energy, but will need to build out its manufacturing capacity for products as wildly varied as laptops and shoes, which is a massive undertaking.
Right, reshoring on a huge scale.
The German bloc's manufacturing capacity is largely in-house, which is an advantage, but raw inputs are wholly absent, a critical dependency. Japan and China, on the other hand, are going to have to head out to secure food and energy and raw materials and markets.
Okay, wow.
Well, while Japan possesses a potent long-reach navy capable of this, most of China's navy can't make it past Vietnam, even in peacetime, severely limiting its reach, according to this source.
A huge constraint for China, then. And here's where the source presents a truly uncomfortable, almost anachronistic scenario. It predicts a return to 17th and 18th century norms of militarized merchant shipping.
Seriously, like pirates and privateers.
But with a modern, terrifying twist. We're talking about missiles and drones and missiles fired from drones.
Oh, great.
This, the source suggests, could lead to an unhealthy amount of risk, transforming global shipping into a highly volatile and unpredictable environment. Perhaps most jarringly, the United States, which once guaranteed global order, is predicted to become an agent of disorder.
From guarantor to agent of disorder?
While its foreign policy will be erratic, the U.S. Navy and Marines are expected to enforce aggressive sanctions, and protect its own interests, potentially transforming the U.S. from a global guarantor of order to an active agent of disorder in regions outside its immediate sphere of interest.
So using its power differently, more selectively, maybe more disruptively for others.
That seems to be the implication. So for you, our listener, what does this all mean? It means the fundamental economics and security of simply moving goods around the world are about to be fundamentally reshaped, impacting our daily lives in ways we haven't experienced in generations.
Finance, as a concept, has a remarkably deep history, long predating our modern economic systems. Our sources remind us that the Great Pooh breakthrough, that agricultural revolution we discussed—
Still chuckling about that name.
Chuckles, right. It didn't just create settled societies, it created a profound need for trade beyond mere exotic goods. The Mesopotamians, around 2000 BCE, ingeniously solved what was called the barley circle problem with the invention of the shekel, which quickly became synonymous with money itself.
So money is ancient.
Very. By 1700 BCE, under the famous Hammurabi, finance was born in a more recognizable sense, offering options for restitution in shekels rather than direct retribution, marking a crucial step in formalizing value and debt.
Okay. Moving beyond barter and simple exchange.
Exactly. Much later, the perpetual floods of Peruvian silver from Potosi, brought in by the Spanish Empire, led to what our source calls de facto economic war and runaway inflation globally.
Right, the Spanish silver flood.
It vividly demonstrated the immense power and inherent perils of a dominant hard currency. Too much of a good thing, basically.
Bringing us to the modern era, let's look at the Bretton Woods order established post-World War II. This rapidly growing global system required more and more U.S. dollars, which, under the prevailing gold standard, needed to be backed by an equivalent amount of gold.
The gold standard seems almost quaint now.
Well, the number simply couldn't add up. Humanity has produced an estimated total of only 6 billion troy ounces of gold throughout history. Even if every single scrap of that gold were available to the U.S. government, it would only be enough to back a global currency supply of about $210 billion.
Which is tiny compared to global trade, even back then.
Exactly. Global trade quintupled between 1950 and 1971, far exceeding this, not to mention the immense size of the U.S. domestic economy. The source concludes, with striking clarity, that even if the politics have been perfect, the gold standard was doomed to fail.
Just not enough gold in the world.
Simple physics and economics of scarcity versus demand.
Beyond the limitations of the gold standard, our sources highlight diverse financial models that have emerged over time. The Japanese model, characterized as money for nothing in one source.
Money for nothing sounds good.
Thought so. Well, it historically views capital as fundamentally serving political needs rather than purely economic ones. The ancient Tokusei doctrine, dating back to the 7th century, is a fascinating example. It allowed for widespread debt forgiveness during times of crisis.
Debt jubilees, essentially.
Well, something like that, reflecting a unique cultural and societal view of debt and its place within the community. In stark contrast, the European model, dubbed the Great Conflation.
The Great Conflation.
Yeah. While certainly embracing the profit motive, often sees governments tinker with financial systems, frequently via state-influenced banks, to secure higher levels of public service, ensure stability, and provide broad support for their populations. It's a model where finance is deeply intertwined with social welfare and state objectives.
So less purely market-driven than, say, the U.S. model.
Generally, yes, according to this interpretation.
Right.
And as we move into the complexities of the modern global economy, our sources really home in on significant financial crises and global imbalances that expose these system vulnerabilities.
Okay, like the 2008 crisis.
Exactly. For America, the 2007-2009 financial crisis, while severe, required a monetary expansion of only about $1 trillion, which was less than 15% of the money supply at the time, to prevent financial Armageddon.
Only $1 trillion. Perspective matters, I guess.
Right. A critical detail here is that U.S. banks today are described as by far the healthiest on the planet, offering a measure of resilience. Even challenges like the shale sector's credit tightening led to new technological advancements and efficiency, demonstrating a certain adaptability.
Okay, so the U.S. system showed some resilience there.
In stark contrast, China's financial system appears to be suffering from massive overexpansion, according to the source. Since 2007, the yuan supply has increased more than 800%.
800%. Wow.
Despite China's economy being smaller than America's, its money supply is often twice as big, leading the source to emphatically declare the yuan a store of value for no one.
Harsh.
This critical imbalance results in annual capital flight regularly topping $1 trillion as wealth seeks the relative safety of the USD network.
$1 trillion leaving China every year.
That's the claim. A critical insight from examining global credit is how unsustainable, rapid expansion, often for political rather than purely economic reasons, consistently leads to national economic fragility. Our sources provide a sobering global credit compendium of cautionary tales that truly underscore this point.
Okay, let's hear some.
Take Greece, for example. It was admitted to the Eurozone despite not meeting debt requirements, then saw its total credit expand by a factor of 7 in just 7 years, leading to an economic implosion twice as much in relative terms as the United States did during the Great Depression.
Twice the Great Depression, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Devastating.
Now it faces a permanent freefall as a tourism-dependent economy and potentially a ward of someone else. Brazil, too, faces years of severe recession, possibly 2 decades, due to rampant credit overexpansion. Saudi Arabia saw a credit boom of 750% since 2000, backed by its immense oil income.
Oil money funding the boom.
Right, but much of it went to vanity projects or subsidies for the population in order to purchase citizen loyalty. This loyalty, the source predicts, will crumble when the oil flow breaks.
Buying loyalty only works while the cash flows.
Seems so. India's credit, a massive factor of 10 increase since 2000, has fueled rapid economic expansion and political calm, but the source warns that when its correction inevitably arrives, it will be epic.
Epic correction, okay.
And in Turkey, where credit increased more than a factor of 12 between 2000 and 2013, it helped consolidate Erdogan's power. But with credit expansion halting in 2013, his rule has become increasingly brittle. This pattern of over-leveraging and fragility is a key takeaway from these financial analyses.
It's a powerful and frankly sobering pattern of credit mismanagement across the globe. It truly underscores the systemic nature of this financial vulnerability. So for you, our listener, what does all this mean?
Yeah, what's the upshot?
It means the very way we fund our world, our businesses, and our daily lives is about to be fundamentally reshaped. The era of cheap, easy, omnipresent finance, which many of us have grown up with, is ending.
The cheap money era is over.
Due to a complex interplay of fiat failures and that demographic crunch we talked about, capital, the source predicts, will flow to what it calls low-hanging fruit regions that are flat, temperate, and possess educated populations.
So geography and human capital become even more critical for attracting investment.
Exactly. A new, stark hierarchy of capital allocation is predicted. Northern Europe leading, followed by Southern Europe, then India, Russia, Brazil, the Middle East, and finally sub-Saharan Africa.
A clear pecking order based on perceived risk and return.
This will create a complex interplay of inflationary and deflationary pressures. Monetary expansion, capital shortages, and broken supply chains are inherently inflationary.
Right, costs go up.
Meanwhile, falling consumption from aging populations and the eventual completion of new industrial plants are disinflationary.
Less demand, maybe more supply eventually. Pushes prices down. Complicated.
Very. Digital technologies can act as both, while currency collapses cause local inflation, but disinflation in regions where capital flees. Commodity shortages, however, are described as pretty much always inflationary.
Yeah, basic supply and demand there. It's also vital to consider the political dimension within this financial flux. Retirees, rapidly becoming a dominant voting bloc in many nations, are characterized as those who fear change.
Like that?
Leading to the rise of increasingly reactionary and brittle cultures. Governments, in turn, are expected to cater more and more to populist demands, walling themselves off from others economically and taking more aggressive stances on military matters.
Protectionism and populism driven by demographics and finance.
That's the argument. Amidst all this global turbulence, the U.S. is seen to have a distinct, multifaceted advantage. It has time, potentially until the 2050s, along with Mexico, due to its best geography for low development costs and its best demography.
Hustle on demography.
Less onerous capital costs compared to rapidly aging societies, and the rise of millennials providing substantial capital by the 2040s, coupled with the relative conservatism of American monetary policy and the dollar's enduring status as the sole reserve currency. This guarantees the U.S. the largest proportion of capital flight from a troubled world, acting as a powerful magnet for global wealth-seeking stability.
So the U.S. benefits from global instability in a financial sense.
According to this analysis, yes. It becomes the safe haven, attracting capital that's fleeing risk elsewhere.
Our sources make it abundantly clear. Modern energy in general and oil in specific is what separates our contemporary world from the pre-industrial.
It's fundamental.
Put simply, it's what distinguishes what we define as civilization from what came before. They use the vivid example of the Kashagan oil field in Kazakhstan, describing it as a bewildering Frankensteinian wonder.
Frankensteinian wonder. Okay.
A colossal, incredibly complex engineering feat whose very existence and almost absurdly complicated export routes are only possible under the aegis of the order.
Only works because of that global stability and trade system.
Exactly, this stark prediction. It will not last. Oil's applications, originally simple lubricants and lighting, expanded dramatically to enable everything in our modern world thanks to continuous material science breakthroughs.
Right. Plastics, fertilizers, transport. It's everywhere. This reliance on oil, however, led to a paradox within the Bretton Woods order. That system demanded that the U.S. not only build, safeguard, and expand a global oil market, but also ensure its stability to support allied economic growth.
Right, fuel the rebuilding and growth.
This success, ironically, led to ever higher global demand. By the early 1970s, America's own energy demands outstripped its production capacity.
The U.S. became a net importer.
Right. This meant the U.S. could no longer fuel their allies, nor critically even fuel themselves, mirroring the earlier failure of the gold standard due to physical limitations. This inconvenient truth became a brass tacks reality for everyone with the Arab oil embargoes of 1973 and 1979.
Yeah, those oil shocks really hit home. Looking at the contemporary map of oil, our source highlights significant shifts. Russia, facing Europe's peaking oil demand, strategically began routing new pipe infrastructure east to the Pacific.
The pivot to Asia.
Despite the immense challenges of permafrost and mountains and distance, as of 2021, 2 main lines are operational, including a spur line directly to China's Gaogang, reorienting global energy flows.
Okay, so Russia looked east. What about the U.S.?
Meanwhile, the U.S. maintains a substantial conventional oil legacy, still producing around 4 million barrels per day. But the real story, we're told, is America's shale oil sector.
The shale revolution.
This massive boom was spurred by 4 simultaneous, seemingly unrelated events in the early 2000s. The U.S. subprime boom creating demand. The Chinese boom driving price-insensitive demand.
Right, they needed oil at almost any price.
An unsuccessful coup in Venezuela leading to a purge of its oil technocrats.
Taking Venezuelan expertise offline.
And the 2003 Iraq invasion, taking its output offline for 16 years. These factors collectively drove oil prices from below $10 to nearly $150 a barrel, making shale extraction economically viable.
Wow, a perfect storm of factors driving prices up and making shale profitable.
Exactly.
Oil transport routes are described as far more concentrated and very long. For example, flows from the Persian Gulf must travel between 5,000 and 7,000 miles to reach East Asian destinations.
Long, vulnerable roads.
And an astonishing 12,000 miles from Venezuela to China, literally more than halfway around the planet. When it comes to exportable oil, the backup isn't much of a backup. Countries like Colombia, Peru, and Trinidad and Tobago are small but stable producers, collectively amounting to a little more than 1 million barrels per day.
A drop in the ocean, relatively speaking.
Pretty much. The U.S. could potentially establish a security cordon around the Western Hemisphere, allowing these exports if no strategic footprint is established by Eastern Hemisphere powers. Venezuela, with its vast reserves, has potential, but it would require a 3-decade reconstruction project, or a Maracaibo secession, to bring a couple of million barrels per day back to market with only a few years and $30 billion in investment.
So Venezuelan oil isn't a quick fix.
Not at all. The grim reality presented is that exportable, sorta reliable supplies globally only amount to a paltry 6 million barrels per day versus a global demand of 97 million, excluding captive or easily disruptible sources. This scarcity of truly available oil is a foundational challenge.
Only 6 million reliable export barrels versus 97 million demand. That's a huge gap. But there's more to oil than oil. Raw oil isn't immediately usable. It needs refinement, and much of it is heavy sours. What does that mean?
Think of it as a thicker, more impure crude oil, often laden with elements like sulfur, which requires more complex and costly refinement processes to become usable fuel. Refineries are complex and expensive pieces of kit.
Right, so you need the right kind of refinery, too. Natural gas is also crucial, described as a premier electricity generation fuel, producing significantly less CO2 than coal.
Cleaner than coal, yes.
Most natural gas is transported by pipe, creating tight economic and geopolitical links between producer and consumer, with Russia historically being the largest exporter. This brings us to a major challenge in a deglobalized world: the green tech dilemma.
Yes, the transition.
The source acknowledges climate change, but emphasizes it's not an even heating, but extremely uneven, impacting land versus water, Arctic versus tropics, and effectively changing the entire map of everything, creating new environmental winners and losers.
Right, climate change isn't uniform. The core issue with green tech, as presented in the source, revolves around concepts like dispatchability and intermittency. What do these mean?
Break those down.
Intermittency describes how wind and solar energy are not constant. They cannot ramp its power output up and down to match demand because power levels naturally vary with weather conditions. Sun doesn't always shine, wind doesn't always blow.
Right. Basic physics.
This leads to a fundamental mismatch. Peak solar supply midday summer often doesn't align with peak demand evening winter. Dispatchability is the ability to turn power on or off or up and down on demand, which green tech largely lacks. You can't just flip a switch for more sun.
Okay. Intermittency and lack of dispatchability. What else?
Geographic limitations are also severe. The same solar panel or wind turbine generates vastly different amounts of power based on its location, say Colorado versus Toronto. High transmission costs are another significant hurdle, as wiring green tech-generated electricity from often remote generation sites to users can double or more the cost of delivered power.
Especially since, as the source says, 95% of humanity sources its electricity from power plants less than 50 miles away. We're used to local power.
Exactly. This necessitates what the source calls a parallel power system. It states that green tech today is so unreliable that localities adopting it have no choice but to maintain a full conventional system for their total peak demand at full cost, meaning you're essentially paying for two power grids.
Paying for solar and the backup gas plant. That's expensive. And here's the critical financial component that compounds the dilemma. Capital costs. In a capital-rich world, what the source calls the late order era, financing 25 years of upfront power bills for green tech was a mere footnote.
Cheap money made big upfront investments easier.
Right. But in the capital-poor world of the disorder, where borrowing costs are significantly higher, conventional systems with their lower initial installation costs suddenly become far more sensible economically, despite their carbon footprint.
So the economics shift back towards fossil fuels if capital gets tight.
That's the argument presented. The stark future presented is that without ample, reliable energy, countries face three incredibly difficult options. To go without electricity, to deindustrialize, to decivilize.
Grim choices.
Or there's option B, to use the one fuel source that nearly all countries have locally, coal.
Ah, the return of King Coal.
Potentially. Germany, for instance, already relies heavily on lignite, which is a very low-grade, energy-dense coal that's abundant locally as its primary power input because green tech is so woefully unapplicable to the German geography, according to this source.
So geography dictates energy reality, even overriding green goals sometimes.
That seems to be the point. This isn't just about turning off the lights. It's about a complete reevaluation of how societies function, produce, and maintain their very existence. The end of global energy as we've known it, the source asserts, heralds the end of the lives we know.
A very dramatic conclusion. When it comes to essential materials, iron ore is the fundamental base material for steel, which in turn is foundational for nearly everything from buildings and roads to telecom towers.
Steel's everywhere.
Absolutely. The source humorously simplifies understanding iron ore by saying, you just need to understand China. While most iron ore production comes from countries facing limited to no security threats in a deglobalizing world, think Australia, Brazil, India, South Africa, Canada, and the U.S.
Okay, the raw material is relatively secure.
Right. But the situation is reversed for major steel exporters. These include Ukraine, Germany, Russia, Korea, Japan, and above all, China. These nations are described as somewhere on the sliding scale between facing severe complications and utterly screwed.
Utterly screwed. Why?
Because their ability to reliably access energy markets or maintain stable production might be compromised in a fractured world. The predicted outcome is a paradoxical situation. Massive shortages of steel at the same time that the supplies of the raw material to make that steel will overflow because the capacity to process it will be severely hampered.
Plenty of ore, but not enough usable steel where it's needed. Got it. Beyond steel, several other critical industrial commodities face significant shifts in this fractured future. Copper demand is directly linked to electrification, construction, and transport.
Copper is essential for wiring, pipes.
Right. If China, which has been the largest and most rapidly expanding market in these sectors, is scooped out, meaning its demand dramatically shrinks, most producers globally would be operating in the red, for years. However, Chile and Peru, with their highest quality mines and lowest operating costs, supply a massive 2/5 of global needs and are in a much stronger position.
So South American copper producers might weather the storm better.
Seems likely. For cobalt, which is critical for batteries and electric vehicles and electronics, Congo's cobalt is found deep in the country's southern jungles. Securing these supplies, the source suggests grimly, might involve direct invasion or the establishment of a very long corridor through Africa, reminiscent of the British Raj in India.
Wow, that's imperialistic thinking.
It's presented as a potential geopolitical reality in a resource-scarce world. Alternatively, Australia and the Philippines could collectively supply about 1/5 of global needs as a more stable, albeit smaller, option.
Lithium, another key battery component, raises what the source calls dirty green math.
Dirty green math. Explain.
Its production and refining for batteries are among the most energy-intensive industrial processes humanity has ever devised. To put this into perspective, a 100-kilowatt Tesla battery built in China, where the grid is largely coal-powered, releases 13,500 kilograms of CO2,
Right.
which is equivalent to a gasoline car traveling 33,000 miles before the EV even moves.
33,000 miles of emissions just to make the battery.
Using China's grid mix, yes. With the U.S. grid, which is cleaner but still uses fossil fuels, the carbon break-even point extends to 55,000 miles. And charging at night, when solar power isn't available, further overstates any green-friendly claims, according to this analysis.
So the embedded carbon in batteries is a major factor we often overlook. What about other materials? Gold.
Gold, perhaps surprisingly, is described as absolutely inefficient as an industrial material due to its limited value add beyond niche semiconductor uses and as a traditional store of value. Recycling accounts for a significant portion of its production.
Okay. Lead.
Lead, despite being a magical substance, easy to mine, refine, shape, and alloy, makes people, well, prone to erratic behavior due to its toxicity. The U.S., for instance, dramatically purged lead from its systems, leading to a 90% drop in ambient air levels.
Right, we got the lead out. Rare earths, China dominates those.
China dominates their current processing, but the source says it's not a secret process, and backup facilities exist in places like South Africa, the U.S., and Australia. These could potentially replace Chinese exports within months if needed, as companies often stockpile them.
So maybe less of a chokehold than often portrayed. Nickel, silicon, zinc.
Russia's Norilsk region is a major nickel producer, but faces geopolitical and logistical complications, suggesting the market might achieve a balance as these factors play out. High-value-add silicon, essential for modern electronics like computer chips, is at particular risk, especially for middle powers without military reach or safe shipping lanes. Think Taiwan, Korea, Germany. And lowly zinc, often found with copper, forms brass, an ancient and versatile alloy. Still important.
All these material shifts feed into what the source calls the great unmaking of manufacturing, that supply chain agony of 2021, with its whiplashing demand and unpredictable disruptions.
Yeah, we all felt that.
Was, according to the source, merely a foreshadowing of the future instability that deglobalization will bring. It claims that even a 1% increase in the cost of a subsidiary part largely obliterates the economics of an existing supply chain, and transport costs could realistically increase by 100%.
A 1% increase breaks the model. That's incredibly sensitive.
It shows how optimized and therefore fragile things became. Think about blue jeans as an example of this extreme global fragmentation. Denim suppliers could be from China, Mexico, or Bangladesh, dyed in Spain, Turkey, or Tunisia with German chemicals. The yarn from India, China, the U.S., Uzbekistan, or Brazil. And the cotton itself from China, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, or Benin.
Wow, a world tour just to make a pair of jeans.
Exactly. The Industrial Revolution, through innovations like steel, truly enabled this kind of specialization and collaboration. Applied to something like a cell phone with its display, battery, wiring, sensors, and processors, it shows how cheap, sacrosanct shipping and nearly endless workforce variety enabled manufacturers to split apart their supply chains into ever more complex, more discrete steps.
Hyper-specialization driven by cheap transport.
Right. This incredible efficiency drove global maritime trade to double in volume and triple in value between 1996 and 2016.
These global manufacturing dynamics mean regional hubs will experience starkly different futures. In Asia, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, excel at high-value-add products like displays and semiconductors, retaining critical technological edges.
The high-tech specialists.
China, which earned its title as the workshop of the world, achieved this through a combination of varied cost structures and ultra-low-cost labor from internal migration. However, 90% or more of the value add for electronics, computers, and ships actually occurs outside China.
So China does the assembly, mostly.
A lot of assembly and lower value components, yes. And its coastal navy is limited, making it vulnerable, the source argues, to Japanese naval action that could shut down Chinese resource inflows. Europe, on the other hand, excels at less complicated manufacturing systems like automotive and aerospace, with Germany notably building the sophisticated machines that enabled China's industrial base.
Building the machines that build the machines.
Exactly. Italy's manufacturing, however, is more about local craft and specialized production. Europe's aging demographics mean it must maintain a high level of exports, with the U.S. as its top destination, despite growing trade friction.
Okay, looking at North America, specifically through the NAFTA agreement, now USMCA, we see a more integrated manufacturing space.
Right, the U.S., Canada, Mexico bloc.
The U.S. has significant internal manufacturing variety, and Mexico complements its system with a substantial 6.1 wage differential, creating a highly efficient, integrated manufacturing space and trade zone. The Texas-Mexico axis is described as perfect for automotive parts, forming a robust regional supply chain.
A strong regional partnership there.
The challenge for Mexico, however, is finding its own Mexico, potentially Central American states through CAFTA, but significant infrastructure problems hinder this expansion. Southeast Asia, in contrast, lacks an obvious region leader and struggles with both food security and sea lane security.
More fragmented, less cohesive.
India, a huge, sprawling country with wild variation, excels in tech servicing, petroleum refining, chemicals, and generic drugs, but its too varied and too heavily populated nature, with immense ethnic and linguistic diversity and multiple governments, presents significant challenges for smooth business relations, according to the source.
Complexity can be a drag on efficiency. So as globalization unwinds, the implications for manufacturing are profound. The source predicts that China's export-driven industrial plant and even parts of its domestic sector will be written off completely as global consumption peaked in 2019.
Written off completely, that's huge economic dislocation.
Massive. Fewer workers globally will inevitably lead to more expensive labor, which will in turn prompt innovation for productivity, potentially leading to material science breakthroughs akin to the Renaissance and Industrial Revolution after the Black Death, driven by necessity.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Higher labor costs driving automation and new materials.
That's the idea. Manufacturing itself will likely repattern into two distinct types. Large core facilities co-located with consumption, meaning producing goods within the market they serve.
Making things closer to home.
And tiny facilities that supply customized parts, like specialized machine shops. This co-location with consumption favors large integrated systems like NAFTA over small isolated markets. Automation will also enable the reshoring of traditionally low-skill industries like textiles and wiring to developed countries.
Reshoring, but with robots, not necessarily lots of jobs.
Exactly. Think the American South, Australia, New Zealand for natural fibers, the U.S. Gulf Coast for synthetics. But critically, these new facilities will require significantly fewer workers, with a single systems engineer potentially able to maintain an acre-sized textile facility. North America, for its part, is also self-sufficient in wood. This raises an important question for all of us. How will societies adapt when the fundamental economics of where and how we make things are turned completely on their head?
Indeed. The source warns this shift understates the impacts, as that seemingly small 1% increase in transport costs can largely obliterate the economics of existing supply chains. This is the world we're moving into, fundamentally poorer and more fractured. Okay, we've just spent considerable time examining a future shaped by pretty quantifiable forces like demographics, economics, and supply chain logistics, drawing from a source that provides a robust, data-driven geopolitical analysis.
Right, a very specific kind of framework.
Now, the materials you provided also introduce a profoundly different lens through which to view these global transformations, a perspective that suggests not just change, but deliberate orchestration.
Yes, a very different interpretation of events.
Our next source presents a challenging counter-narrative, positing that many global events are not random, but part of a coordinated agenda by a group it refers to as a cult. It's vital for us to explore this perspective impartially, understanding the claims made without endorsing them, as our mission is to reflect your sources.
Absolutely. This second source presents a view where global events, including perceived crises, are seen as not random, but are instead perceived as being orchestrated by a coordinated cult, described as a satanic or semi-secret group operating through various established institutions. Governments, corporations, the banking system, media, and even Silicon Valley.
So, a hidden hand pulling the strings of major institutions.
That's the core allegation. This perspective alleges that most of what humanity is taught as fact is nothing more than programmed belief, and that censorship and what it terms perceptual programming are actively used to control human behavior and ensure compliance. This framework fundamentally challenges mainstream narratives across a wide array of topics.
This is a profound departure from traditional geopolitical analysis, offering a meta-narrative about how our world truly operates. The source details alleged mechanisms of control, specifically highlighting problem-reaction solution, PRS.
Problem-reaction solution, yeah, that's a known concept in conspiracy circles. Create a problem, stoke a reaction, offer your pre-planned solution.
Right, and it also mentions totalitarian tiptoe, TT, as major cult techniques. It even introduces a concept it calls no problem reaction solution.
No problem. What's that?
Which describes a scenario where a perceived problem, such as human-caused global warming or the COVID pandemic, both of which this source explicitly labels as hoaxes, is allegedly manufactured or exaggerated to justify predetermined solutions that serve the cult's agenda.
Okay, so manufacturing the problem itself, not just exploiting one.
That's the claim. Klaus Schwab's Great Reset is cited as a prime example of this, with the source claiming it uses the problem of COVID to justify a total transformation of society, which the author alleges is a core cult plan.
Right. The Great Reset is often featured in these narratives.
Furthermore, this perspective claims that traditional monarchies were replaced by democracy as a dictatorship of the people hiding behind the concept of democracy, and that political parties function as perceptual gulags, where cult operatives influence policy and societal direction.
So, democracy itself is presented as a tool of control in this view. Within this framework, the source makes specific and wide-ranging allegations about political and historical events. It asserts that both the U.S. Democratic and Republican parties are effectively vehicles for the cult.
Both parties.
Both, yes. With prominent figures like Trump and Biden allegedly used for specific agendas, for instance, to divide America or advance the woke agenda, according to this source. Moving to deeper historical claims, the source claims that Sabbatean Frankism, which it describes as a sinister cult, infiltrated Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and nations globally, and significantly influenced the House of Saud.
Okay, these are very specific and very controversial historical claims.
Extremely. It further alleges that ultra-Zionists controlled the Federal Reserve and that the events of 9/11 were a carefully executed problem-reaction solution designed to justify wars and regime change in the Middle East. It's important to reiterate that we're simply conveying the claims found within this particular source, maintaining strict impartiality.
Understood. The narrative surrounding public health crises is also heavily challenged by this perspective. The source claims that the virus pandemic of COVID-19 was illusory and triggered out of China.
Illusory. Okay.
It asserts that the PCR test, according to its inventor Carrie Mullis, who, we should note, died before the pandemic, doesn't tell you that you're sick, and that alleged false positives make the real false positive rate 100%.
Right. The PCR test criticism is common in these narratives, often citing Mullis.
The medical system itself, the source alleges, is complicit, with doctors and medical staff acting as repeaters gophers who simply purvey what the system demands. It claims instructions were given to put COVID-19 on death certificates, even for deaths from other causes, regardless of the actual cause.
Inflating the numbers is the claim.
That's the allegation. Masks, it's argued, lead to oxygen deprivation and shed microplastics and are used as part of mind control, with a reference to the infamous Culture Project. Lockdowns, the source claims, are designed for dismantling the human mind, breaking the human spirit, destroying independent livelihoods, and creating dependency on the state.
So every public health measure is reinterpreted as a control mechanism. This highlights how, for this source, official narratives around public health crises are viewed with extreme skepticism, rooted in a belief that underlying agendas are always at play.
Definitely. Further extending these claims, the source alleges that the COVID-19 vaccines are DNA manipulating, designed to cumulatively rewrite human genetics with potential harms including infertility.
The genetic modification claim, yes.
It claims that their trials are ongoing and that coercing people to take them violates the Nuremberg Code. This perspective doesn't stop at health. It also encompasses broader societal transformations. The woke ideology, for instance, is described as a cult-induced coma.
Woke as a coma.
That promotes political correctness to silence debate, and human-caused climate change, again, claimed as a hoax, to justify global control and other transformations.
So linking social justice movements and climate action to this alleged cult agenda.
Exactly. This source also delves into extraordinary allegations concerning human body transformation and control. It discusses the concept of the Internet of Bodies, IOB, citing a Forbes article where devices injected or implanted in the body could allow for remote monitoring and control of individuals.
The Internet of Bodies sounds like science fiction.
Well, it's discussed in mainstream tech circles too, but this source gives it a sinister interpretation. In a highly impactful quote, Moderna's chief medical officer, Tal Zaks, is quoted from a 2017 TED Talk stating, "We are actually hacking the software of life."
Hacking the software of life, referring to mRNA.
Yes, referring to messenger RNA, mRNA, as an operating system that can change a line of code with profound implications. The source connects this directly to alleged DNA-changing intentions.
Okay, taking a scientific metaphor very literally and applying it to the vaccine context.
That appears to be the interpretation here. Further claims about gender fusion and declining birth rates and fertility, such as falling levels of the male hormone testosterone due to chemicals like phthalates, are presented as part of a systematic agenda for human body transformation. Even Bill Gates's call for synthetic meat is cited as part of this alleged comprehensive transformation of human life.
So a whole range of societal and biological changes are woven into this single conspiracy narrative. Finally, this source introduces what it describes as the ultimate unseen controllers. It posits the concept of archons, led by Yaldabaoth, described as the Old Testament god or Satan, who are alleged to feed off energy compatible with their own frequency.
Archons, like from Gnosticism.
Exactly, drawing on Gnostic concepts. They allegedly feed off human low vibrational frequencies generated by negative emotions like fear and conflict, particularly from wars. This perspective claims that our very reality is a bad copy or a virtual reality simulation.
We're living in the Matrix, basically.
That's the idea presented. And that Lucifer, as the light bringer of radiation light, is symbolic of this simulated reality. The ultimate plan, as alleged by this source, includes a future of a synthetic human designed to cope with radiation and a global AI smart grid intended to control everything and eventually replace human minds, leading to a technological prison of the mind.
Wow, okay.
Wernher von Braun, a prominent rocket scientist, is cited as having warned of a sequence to global control ending with a bogus alien invasion.
The fake alien invasion trope.
Yes. This is truly a profound shift from economic and geopolitical analysis to a meta-narrative about the very nature of reality and human experience itself, and it's a perspective that permeates the material we've reviewed from this particular source.
What an incredible journey we've taken today. We've traversed from the tangible, data-driven predictions of deglobalization and demographic collapse.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts stuff.
To the equally compelling, if extraordinarily controversial, claims of a hidden hand guiding global events. We've explored the complex landscapes of transport, finance, energy, and manufacturing.
All the systems.
And then delved into deeply challenging ideas about control, societal transformation, and even the nature of reality itself. It's a lot to take in.
Indeed. The sources you've provided have laid out two very different yet equally urgent maps of the future. Whether you lean towards the economic and geopolitical forecasts, grappling with the concrete challenges of an unwinding global order.
Like Zeihan's work, for instance.
Right. Or find yourself reflecting on the alternative narratives of systemic control and planned societal transformation.
Like the second source we discussed.
The common thread is clear: change. Massive, pervasive, and deeply personal change is upon us, whichever framework you find more convincing.
So, as you process all this information, what stands out most to you? As we confront a future where established orders are crumbling and alternative realities are being asserted, how do you discern the geographies of success, not just for nations, but for your own understanding of reality?
Yeah, how do you make sense of it all?
This deep dive reminds us that being truly well-informed isn't just about absorbing facts. It's about critically engaging with every perspective, understanding their frameworks, their assumptions, their evidence, or lack thereof, and ultimately deciding what to build your own understanding upon.
It's about developing your own critical lens.
Exactly. We hope this exploration gives you much to consider as you navigate the changing world.